I never imagined that the first time I'd walk into a courtroom as an almost attorney, it would be to defend myself from my own family. The heavy wooden doors creaked as I pushed them open, and in that moment, every head turned toward me, my mother's eyes narrowing in judgment, my father's lips pressing into that familiar line of disappointment, and my older brother sinking back in his chair with a smirk that said, "She's going to lose." They all looked me up and down, scanning my old navy blue suit like it was a costume I had no right to wear. My mother even nudged my father and whispered, "See? She couldn't even buy a new outfit. And she thinks she can manage $1 million trust?" My father didn't hide his reaction. He rolled his eyes so hard I was surprised they didn't get stuck in the back of his skull. My brother joined in, muttering, "This will be over quick." I stood there for a second, clutching the handles of my worn leather bag, feeling the edges of the 3 folders inside cutting into my palms, red, blue, and black. They felt heavier than anything I had ever carried in my life. Each one contained pieces of my truth, my fear, and my survival. Their attorney, a tall, sharp-faced man in an expensive suit, looked at me like I was a child who'd wandered into the wrong room. "Miss," he said with a false smile, "the seating for observers is in the back." I didn't flinch. I didn't blink. I just walked past him, straight to the petitioner's table, and placed my folders neatly on the polished wood. "I'm not an observer," I said quietly. "I'm here to represent myself." He blinked twice, taken aback. My mother scoffed loud enough for the entire room to hear. "You," she spat. "You've never been good with money, sweetheart. That's why we're doing this. You're too emotional. Too soft. Too smart," I cut in, turning to face her. "Smart enough to pass the bar." The room fell silent. Even the judge paused mid-sentence. His glasses slid slightly down his nose as he looked at me properly for the first time. "You, passed the bar," he repeated, eyebrows lifting. "Yes, Your Honor," I said. 2 weeks ago." Their attorney dropped the smug expression immediately and flipped through his papers like he'd overlooked something crucial. My brother's smirk faltered. My mother's face went pale, her lips trembling for a split second before she tightened them. Suddenly, I wasn't the helpless girl they'd always treated like a burden. Suddenly, I was a threat. I took my seat, forcing my shaking hands to still. I wasn't scared because they were right, I wasn't good with money. I was scared because they were wrong, I was better than they ever believed. The judge looked down at the petition filed against me, the words heavy and cruel. Conservatorship sought due to incompetence and inability to manage financial matters. Incompetent. Unable. Unfit. All words my family had spent years drilling into my skull. I swallowed hard, remembering the day I turned 18 and my parents told me about the trust my grandmother left me, a trust they insisted on managing until I was stable. I didn't know then that stable meant silent, and managing meant controlling. Now, at 24, with a law degree, a bar certificate, and the strength I fought like hell to develop, they were trying to drag me back into the cage I had just escaped. Their attorney stood and began painting me as someone irresponsible, someone who needed guidance, someone who struggled with emotional regulation, someone prone to impulsive decisions. My heart pounded, but I kept my head high. I knew this script already. They'd rehearsed it on me since childhood. When he finished, the judge turned to me. "Miss," he said kindly, "you may respond." I stood slowly, opening my red folder, filled with documents they didn't know I had. But before I could speak, I let my eyes meet my mother's. She looked furious. Angry I wasn't crying. Angry I wasn't begging. Angry that for the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid. And in that split second, something inside me shifted, something I had buried deep for years beneath the weight of their words. I realized this wasn't just a petition for conservatorship. This was an attempt to erase me, to turn me into a puppet tied to their greed. It was betrayal, deep, sharp, unforgettable. And I wasn't going to let them win. I breathed in slowly, closed my fingers around the first page of evidence, and said, "Your Honor, everything they just told you is a lie." And I can prove it. The courtroom braced itself. This was my fight. My life. My voice. And I was finally taking it back. The moment I opened the red folder, a wave of memories hit me like a punch to the chest, years of being talked over, pushed aside, and treated like a problem my family had to manage rather than a daughter they cared about. Because the truth was, their greed didn't begin in that courtroom. It began long before I ever knew what a trust was. I grew up believing my parents were strict because they wanted the best for me. That's what everyone said when they saw my mother yank my report card out of my hands before I could show it to anyone. Or when my father accidentally forgot to pick me up from school because he had more important work. Or when my brother told me that my achievements were cute, compared to his. I thought I was the problem. Too quiet. Too hardworking. Too desperate to be seen. But I understand now, my invisibility wasn't a side effect. It was a plan. When I was 13, I overheard my parents whispering in the living room. I didn't understand much back then, just fragments. Your mother's trust, only she's named. Ridiculous that they bypassed us. We'll handle it when she turns 18. I remember lying awake that night, clutching my pillow, wondering what it meant. I would understand years later. My grandmother, my father's mother, was the only person in my childhood who treated me with softness. She wore the same warm scarf every winter and kept peppermint candies in her pocket. She told me once that I reminded her of herself, quiet but sharp, unnoticed but capable. When she died, my parents didn't let me attend her funeral. They said it would be too much for me. But the truth was simpler. They didn't want anyone asking why I inherited something when they didn't. When I turned 18, they finally told me about the trust. $1.2 million. Left entirely in my name. Untouched. Unlocked. Uncontrolled, unless I chose someone to help. And that's exactly what terrified them. They told me about it like it was a burden, not a blessing. My mother sighed dramatically, saying, "Sweetheart, trust funds can be confusing. Luckily, your father and I can manage it for you." My father nodded, adding, "It's better if you don't touch it. You're not responsible enough yet." I believed them, not because I was stupid, but because they had spent my entire life convincing me my instincts were flawed. When I got into law school, they rolled their eyes. When I worked 2 part-time jobs, they said I was being dramatic. When I graduated, my brother asked, "Are you sure you'll survive in a real firm?" But the real shift, the moment the mask slipped, was a year ago. I came home for a weekend, tired and buried in finals, and found a stack of letters on the kitchen counter. They weren't mine, but my name was printed on all of them. Financial statements. Tax documents. Notices from the trust management office. All opened. My mother casually said, "Oh, we open your mail now. It's easier that way." No apology. No explanation. Just ownership. I didn't argue that day. I was exhausted and broke and surviving on caffeine and textbooks. But I remembered it. I filed it away quietly, like every bruise they left on my confidence. When I finally passed the bar exam, I came home with the biggest smile I had ever worn. I expected something, maybe pride, maybe a hug, maybe even a small good job. Instead, my mother asked, "Does this mean you'll finally get a higher salary so you won't depend on that trust?" And my father muttered, "Well, now's the time to move the trust under our name. Before she makes a mess of it." That was when I truly saw it, not love, not concern. Greed. Plain. Simple. Cold. Greed. The petition for conservatorship arrived 2 weeks later. They claimed I was unstable. They claimed I was financially irresponsible. They claimed I needed protection, from myself. All lies. But lies, when spoken by enough people, start sounding like truth. That's what these 3 folders were for. The red one contained every opened letter, every bank statement my parents tried to hide, and every message where they talked about my trust like it was theirs. The blue one held something worse, evidence of their financial problems, my father's business debt, my brother's gambling, the house that was nearly in foreclosure. They didn't see me as a daughter. They saw me as a lifeline. And the black folder. That one held the recordings. Recordings I never meant to take. Recordings of them discussing how to control me. Recordings of my mother telling my brother that once they got the conservatorship, he'd get a new car. Recordings of my father saying, "She's naive. She won't fight back." Standing in that courtroom, I felt my heart harden for the first time. This wasn't just a legal battle. This was the truth about my family. They didn't love me. They valued me. My trust. My money. My silence. But they forgot something important. I might have been raised to be quiet. But I taught myself how to speak. And now, I was going to make sure every single truth they tried to bury rose to the surface. When the judge nodded for me to proceed, my heart hammered so hard I thought the whole courtroom could hear it. I wasn't just fighting a legal battle, I was fighting the ghosts of every moment my family made me feel small, fragile, and helpless. I placed my hands on the red folder. The weight of it felt like the weight of my entire life. "Your Honor," I began, my voice steadier than I felt, "before I present my evidence, I want to make something clear. My parents and brother didn't file this petition out of concern. They filed it out of greed." Their attorney immediately stood. "Objection, speculation." "Not speculation," I said, snapping open the red folder. "Documentation." The judge gestured for me to continue. I lifted the first page and held it up for the courtroom. "These are letters from the Trust Management Office, letters that were addressed to me, meant for my eyes only, but opened by my parents without my consent." I slid them onto the evidence table. The courtroom remained still, too still. "Your Honor," I said, turning to the judge, "these letters show transactions and attempts to request early withdrawals. Requests I never made." My father leaned forward, face reddening. "That's not true. You don't understand how trusts work." I cut him off without looking at him. "I understand well enough to know that forging a beneficiary's signature is illegal." A soft ripple passed through the room like a breeze. My mother's manicured fingers began shaking. Their attorney stepped forward again, trying to regain control. "Miss, you are making some very serious accusations." "Yes," I said calmly, "and I have evidence to back every one of them." I opened the blue folder next. If the red folder was betrayal, the blue one was exposure. "These are my parents' financial records," I said, laying out the printed bank statements, debt notices, and foreclosure warnings. "Every one of these documents is public record. Anyone can access them." So I did. My brother shifted uncomfortably. He knew what was coming. "My parents are over $300,000 in debt," I continued. "My father's business loan is overdue. Their house is months away from foreclosure. And my brother," he inhaled sharply, "has accumulated over $40,000 in gambling debt." He slammed his palm on the table. "That has nothing to do with this." "It has everything to do with this," I said, locking eyes with him. "Because the conservatorship petition was filed the week after your last debt notice arrived." My mother's face went white. My father looked like someone had punched the air out of his lungs. Their attorney tried to salvage what he could. "Your Honor, financial issues do not prove malicious intent." "No," I agreed. "That's why I brought the black folder." I reached for it slowly, deliberately. For the first time, I saw something new in my father's eyes. Fear. The black folder clicked open with a sound that echoed in the silent courtroom. I pulled out a series of USB drives and a stack of transcripts. "These," I said softly, "are recordings." My mother gasped, a sharp inhale that sliced through the room. I pushed a transcript toward the judge. "They include conversations where my parents and brother discuss taking control of my trust. Not for my safety. Not for my future. But to pay their debts." Their attorney snatched up one of the transcripts and skimmed the first few lines. I watched the color drain from his face. In one recording, my mother said, "Once the conservatorship is approved, we can restructure the trust. She won't have access, and we can finally pay off these loans." In another, my father added, "She's too soft. She'll sign whatever we tell her to." But the worst one, the one that made my stomach twist every time, was my brother's voice saying, "Just let me handle her. She trusts me. She won't see it coming." The attorney stumbled. "My clients, this must be taken out of context." "It's impossible to take financial exploitation out of context," I replied. The judge took a long breath and leaned back in his chair, reading through the pages slowly, his expression shifting from curiosity, to shock, to anger. Finally, he looked at my family. "Is there anything you wish to say about these recordings?" My father opened his mouth, but no sound came out. My mother tried to speak, but only tears spilled over, more from exposure than remorse. My brother stared at me with pure hatred, as if I had shattered some unspoken family rule by daring to defend myself. But I wasn't done yet. I stepped forward one last time. "Your Honor," I said, my voice shaking, "I am not incompetent. I am not irresponsible. I am not unstable. I put myself through law school. I passed the bar. I worked 2 jobs. I survived on my own. They filed this petition not because I can't manage my life, but because I stopped letting them manage me." My throat tightened, but I didn't break. "Everything they told you about me is a lie. This conservatorship was never about protecting me. It was about possessing me." Silence. Then the judge spoke. "Miss," he said, "you may be the calmest person in this courtroom." I felt a knot in my chest loosen, slowly, painfully. "For the court record," he continued, "the evidence you provided is compelling and deeply concerning." My family froze. "It appears clear that the petition was filed under false pretenses." Their attorney dropped his pen. And for the first time in my life, I saw my parents look small. The truth was out. The lies were exposed. And the power they thought I'd never have? It was finally mine. For a long moment, the courtroom stayed suspended in silence, like everyone was holding their breath, waiting for the judge to deliver a verdict that would either shatter my life or finally set me free. The judge removed his glasses, folded his hands, and looked directly at my parents. "Based on the evidence presented," he said slowly, "this court finds no grounds for a conservatorship." My mother let out a broken sob. My father muttered something under his breath, something like impossible. My brother just stared at me with that same look he used to give me when he thought I didn't deserve something, a twisted mix of jealousy and disbelief. But the judge wasn't finished. "In fact," he continued, "there appears to be concerning evidence of attempted financial exploitation." Their attorney tried to stand, but the judge raised a hand. "No. Sit down." That single sentence felt like justice by itself. Given the seriousness of the allegations, the judge said, "I am referring this matter to the proper authorities for further investigation." My parents' faces drained almost simultaneously, like someone had pulled the plug on their confidence. My mother reached for my father's arm, he pulled away. And my brother whispered, not quietly enough, "You said she wouldn't fight back." The judge turned to me. "Miss, you are dismissed from this petition with full autonomy over your trust and personal affairs. And, let me be clear. You handled yourself today with the composure of an attorney far more experienced than your age." My throat tightened. I bowed my head slightly. "Thank you, Your Honor." The gavel struck once, echoing like thunder. Case dismissed. Just like that, years of their insults, manipulations, and whispered doubts cracked and fell away. The courtroom blurred for a moment as I blinked back tears, not of sadness, but of relief so deep it hurt. As I gathered my folders, my mother rushed toward me. Her mascara was smudged, her voice trembling. "Sweetheart, we didn't mean." I took a step back. Don't, I whispered. Not today. Not ever again. She froze. Maybe for the first time, she saw me not as someone she could control, but as someone beyond her reach. My father spoke next, voice sharp, brittle. You didn't have to do this publicly. You embarrassed us. I looked him dead in the eye. You tried to steal my life. You're lucky all you lost today was your pride. My brother tried to grab my arm as I turned to leave. You're really going to walk out on your family? I pulled my arm away. My family walked out on me years ago. You just made it official. His hand lingered in the air for a moment before dropping limp at his side. I didn't look back again. When I stepped outside, the sunlight hit my face like a blessing. Warm. Clear. Real. For the first time in years, I breathed fully. Sweet revenge. People think revenge is about destruction. About fire and fury. But mine wasn't. My revenge was simple. I lived. On my terms. Without them. Within a month, the investigation began, my parents were questioned, their financial records reviewed, their signatures analyzed. Karma didn't come fast, but it came steadily, like a tide rising at their feet. My father's business collapsed. My brother's gambling debt became his own burden. My mother's perfect social image cracked under pressure. And me? I used a part of my trust to rent my first apartment, small, sunlit, quiet. I bought myself a new suit for my first job interview. I framed my bar exam results and hung them in my living room. Every morning I woke up knowing that while my family tried to make me dependent, I built a life where I no longer needed them at all. That was my revenge. Not cruelty. Not punishment. Freedom. A new future. 6 months later, I stood in front of the glass doors of a law firm that had offered me a junior associate position. My first real job as an attorney. I thought about the little girl I once was, the girl who begged for approval, who lowered her voice to avoid conflict, who believed every cruel word her parents fed her. I wished I could tell her. You survived. You were always stronger than they said. And one day, you'll walk into a courtroom and save yourself. As I stepped into the firm, I felt something lift off my shoulders, a final release of every weight my family had piled onto me. I wasn't afraid anymore. I wasn't alone. I wasn't theirs. I was mine. And the future I was about to build would be the sweetest revenge of all.